Hello everyone, I'm back. I'm sorry I didn't post last Wednesday and Friday, but I found myself battling a cold, and then I lost my voice, and there was just no way I was going to be able to make videos, so I apologize for that, but I'm doing a little bit better now. But for today, we're going to begin working on the logic for my Sokovia toy box. And we're going to begin with the mission to rescue the townspeople. This is a simple mission, and it's very similar to missions I've built in other toy boxes, but there is one major difference. I'm going to create the mission giver dynamically so that I can remove him after he's given the player their first mission. And this is going to help save memory, but more importantly, it's going to minimize lag, which is really crucial in this particular toy box. Because once the mission starts, I'm going to have 5 townspeople running around that I need to save. I'm going to have a bunch of enemies in here. I'm going to have 2 cannons flying overhead on long, winding paths over top of the city with branches. Plus, I've got multiple animated objects in here, like these rotating blades here on the helicarrier, and we're going to have smoke effects running over in the city, and we're going to have things like these little bursting pipes around the city, and so there's a lot going on in here that's using up CPU and requires a lot of processing power. And if you use too much processing power, it causes lag because the CPU can't keep up. And the lag can quickly get out of control if you're not careful, so it's important not to add anything until you need it, and to remove anything you don't need once you're done with it. And so first thing I want to do, I need to clear my replayer here. Should probably put a little climbing pipe up here or something temporarily so I can get up here. But I want to clear. And that removes the spinning blades, as I showed you last time. And then the next thing I want to do is pick up my level starter that we left here last time. And we're going to move this over to the city. And I've already placed a bunch of Creativitoys over here ahead of time. I've done about a half an hour worth of prep work here ahead of time. Don't be alarmed by that, though. I'm going to show you everything I've done. I did this to save time, but let me start by reviewing the Creativitoys that I've placed. And all I've done for most of these is just place them out of the drawer. And for the ones where I've done any configuring, I'll show you what I've done. So we have our level starter that we dropped last time. We have an action enforcer and a sound effects generator. And these 2 toys are going to be used for our end of mission sounds, which is kind of why they're over here by themselves. I've got a button that I've placed here temporarily that we're going to need to reset things. Not sure if we're going to use that today or not, but I placed it in case I need it. We have our collection pen and a locator in the middle of the collection pen with a radar marker that we're going to connect to that shortly. For our mission giver, to dynamically generate them, I've got a dynamic trigger and a friendly wave generator. And for the mission giver themselves, we have a radar marker, another dynamic trigger, and a text displayer. These are kind of the standard 3 things we use for a mission giver. And then for the mission, we have another friendly wave generator that I've connected to a ton of locators around here, and I'll show you where those are in a moment. And another radar marker so we can find the townspeople. And then for the enemies in this one, I have this Kiln enemy spawning chamber from the Escape the Kiln 2.0 playset, or toy box game. And I've got several of these scattered around here. And for this to work with the mission, I've got a locator, a dynamic trigger, and a logic gate. So these 4 things go together. I've placed one here near the start. I've placed another set of them down here. And I've placed another set of them in this park. And I would recommend, I didn't do this for my toy box and for the playthrough because I didn't feel that was necessary, but what I would recommend is placing 2 more of these sets of toys, these 4 toys. All right, place one over here in this corner behind the old church, and place another set out here on this corner of the toy box. And so that way you're going to run into these a little bit more frequently than I did during the playthrough. I didn't want to get bogged down with fighting those enemies, so I didn't do that. And if you want a 6th one, you can put that out here. But I don't know that you'll always run into this one. Those other 5 you will run into a little more frequently as you do the mission. And then I've got locators scattered around this toy box that's connected to this friendly wave generator. And these are the locators where the townspeople are going to show up. So let me show you where those are. I've got one in this alley. We'll kind of go clockwise around the toy box here. I've got one over here and one over here. And then on the back side of these buildings, I've got one there and one there. Another one out over here. And the exact placement of these doesn't really matter. You want about 15 to 20 of these to make the random generation really unpredictable. Got one here. Got one here. One in the middle of this rubble building. Another in the middle of that rubble building. One over here in the park. Got one here in this street. And then I got one on each of these little peninsulas out here. And one over here. And again, you can feel free to pause that if you want to try to get them in the same place that I have. But again, the placement doesn't really matter. All of mine are on the ground, and I just thought of this, but if you wanted to, and you're on a system with a little bit more memory, you can put some up on the rooftops as well, and maybe add some climbing pipes so that players who can't wall climb or fly can get up there, and that would get the player moving up off of the ground too, where they can kind of get an aerial view of the city. One of the things I like playing as the Hulk is I can super jump on top of the buildings and wall climb up them. And so yeah, having a townsperson up there perhaps might provide a little bit of a extra challenge, a little bit of a new place to go for the player. Alright, and that is all of the toys. Oh, and I've got a locator here for Luke Cage, who's going to be our mission giver. Alright, let's start with dynamically adding our mission giver. So I've already set up this friendly wave generator here to configure the waves, so you didn't have to watch me scroll through that long list of townspeople, but I've got Luke Cage in here. And we're going to set the properties on this to turn, let's see, those off. We'll take the generation delay to 0 because we want him to show up immediately. We will disable generation effects. This is fine. And yeah. And the generated friend options doesn't matter because as a he's not a townsperson. He's not what do they call those guys? Cast members. As a cast member, they're going to ignore these friend options. So you can set him to stand still. He's still going to wander around. All right. And we'll connect up this friendly wave generator to our locator over here. That's where we're going to put him. We're also going to connect up this dynamic trigger to that. And we're going to use the dynamic trigger to take him out once the mission has been given. Because again, once he's given us the mission, he doesn't need to be in here. So once the player leaves the radius that this is going to specify around Luke Cage, then we'll remove him. So under the properties, we're going to set the target to be, let's see, am I connecting this to the locator? No, I am not. Sorry. This should be connected to that as an actor. While I'm right here, though, let's set this to 40. And let's delete that link, because Luke Cage, again, is going to wander around. So we really need to connect this to this. That's what we need. All right. And then what we will do is we'll come over to our level starter and do a new logic connection on catalyze. We'll come over to our friendly wave generator and generate the wave. That will put Luke Cage in here. All right. And we want to have this off by default, just in case the player doesn't get close enough to talk to Luke Cage and wanders away from him. And so on the level starter, we'll do a new logic connection on catalyze, and we'll turn that off. And again, we're going to use this to take him out when we're ready. All right, so that puts Luke Cage in here. And now let's set him up as a mission giver. So for the radar marker, we'll come under the properties. The beacon type we're going to set to a yellow exclamation point. Again, that's what we do for main story quests, not side quests. Beacon visibility all. We want it on the connected actor, which will be Luke Cage. And I want this active when we first come into the toy box. And then we'll do a new actor connection, and we'll connect that up to our friendly wave generator. So as soon as Luke Cage spawns, the radar marker will show up over his head. Alright, this dynamic trigger is for the mission giver, so when the player gets close enough to talk to him to get the mission, that's what this is going to do for us. So here, again, new actor connection. And under the properties, target will be the connected actor. Trigger distance on this one we're going to set to 6. So you got to get pretty close to talk to him. Alright, and then once he enters this trigger area, this is what's going to kick off the mission. This is what's going to enable this to take Luke Cage out once we get away from him and run away, and so on. So this is pretty much what will drive the start of the mission. Before we do that, though, let's set up our text displayer here. So text duration I'm going to set to 4. Text style we'll set to banner. Okay, so for our mission giver on the dynamic trigger, a new logic connection. When entered by player any. So the first thing we'll do is come over to our text displayer, and under the defense category, deliver friends to the base for extra loot. That's the closest thing I have for a message that tells the player, go round up the townspeople and deliver them to the collection pen over there. Alright. Next thing we will do, new logic connection on that dynamic trigger. When entered by player any, we want to turn off the radar marker for Luke Cage. New logic connection when entered by player any. We're going to turn on this dynamic trigger. And then on this dynamic trigger, a new logic connection when exited by player any. Remember, this is set to 40, so this is a pretty wide radius around Luke Cage. So the player is going to be running off to do their mission. And when they do, then we want to come over here to our friendly wave generator for Luke Cage and defeat the wave, and that will take Luke Cage out. Okay. All right. So that's it for our mission giver. Now let's set up the rest of the mission. So for the townspeople here, if we open up and look at the way I've configured the wave, and once again I've put all of these guys in here so you didn't have to watch me scroll through that long list, but I chose Lewis, Agent Coulson, Aunt May, J. Jonah Jameson, and Pepper Potts. You can choose any townspeople you like. Those are the ones that I chose. I would recommend choosing townspeople, not cast members. It just works better with townspeople. I had cast members, here initially, and I just deleted Pepper Potts. Hit the wrong button. But anyway, she'll be in here, so I'm not going to go through and pick her again. But yeah, it works better with townspeople, so make sure you do that. If you have cast members, they do weird things with that collection pen and stuff, so I wouldn't recommend doing that. On the properties for the townspeople, we are going to generate at a random locator. Countdown is off. Generation delay, we'll take that to 0. Disable generation effects. And I'm going to set the generated friend options on these guys. You could set them to flee, which makes them a little bit probably more realistic and a little harder to grab. For the purposes of the playthrough, I set it to wander just to make it a little bit easier. But I would recommend setting this to flee. That makes it a little bit more of a challenge to catch them. That makes it also a little bit more realistic when they get around the enemies. They look like they're trying to get away. And then I've already done new locator connections for all those locators. And you saw me hook this up. Those are the same way, except you're connecting them to all of those locators that I showed you. Alright, and this radar marker is to help us find those townspeople. So we're going to do a new actor connection. We're going to connect that up to our friendly wave generator so that it'll show up over all of the townspeople that we generate. On the properties for this, beacon type is going to be a yellow arrow. Beacon location will be the connected actor. And the rest of those are fine. And then we also have a locator and a radar marker over here to show the player where to take the enemy, or where to take the townspeople. And so on this one, we're going to do a new locator connection. Connect that up to this locator. And on the properties for this, beacon type is going to be a yellow ring. Beacon location will be the locator. And the rest of those properties are fine. Alright, so back to the dynamic trigger for the mission giver. And again, this is what kicks off the mission. So on here we are going to do a new logic connection when entered by player any. We're going to generate the wave for the townspeople. And a new logic connection when entered by player any. Turn on the radar marker. Activate. And a new logic connection when entered by player any. Turn on that radar marker. Okay. On the collection pen, we're not going to do any logic connections here. So on this, we're just going to set the property to remove the counted actor. And what that means is then we can use this friendly wave generator to detect the end of the mission, because once the last townsperson has been removed, the wave will be defeated, and that's going to be what we're going to key off of for the end of the mission. So on here, we're going to do a new logic connection on wave defeated. We're going to do a number of things here. So the first thing we want to do is come over to our action enforcer. Oops, this one. And we're going to have all the players celebrate. And a new logic connection when the wave is defeated. Come over to the sound effect generator, and under the musical category I'll play my standard fanfare, which is what I like to play at the end of a mission to let the player know they won. And then new logic connection when the wave is defeated. We'll go ahead and turn off these radar markers, even though there won't be anything for this radar marker to show on it. It's still using up CPU, so we want to make sure we turn it off. So when the wave is defeated, we can turn this one off as well. Because the collection pen is done, they don't need to do anything with that anymore. Alright, and then next time we're also going to use this with the wave defeated to set up the next mission, but we'll save that for next time. Alright, so that is pretty much it for the mission itself. Now if you're just running around fetching townspeople and bringing them back here to the collection pen, that can get kind of boring. So that's why we have these enemy spawning chambers. And you could use enemy wave generators to put enemies throughout the toy box. That's what I had done initially, was I had this connected to some enemy wave generators, and I just put them throughout the toy box and had them scattered around the city. What I discovered, though, was that the enemies, they tend to wander when you're not there, and so you'd end up in a place where you'd start fighting some enemies, and all the enemies from the city would come running to you, and then there's no enemies left anywhere else in the city. And so that got kind of boring. And so what I did instead was I set up these enemy spawning chambers around, and we're only going to start these when the player enters that area. And what that does is as you move throughout the toy box and you come over and pass close to this or get near it, it'll spawn the enemies for that, but the other chambers will not be doing anything until you get close to them. And so that kind of guarantees that you got enemies throughout the city as you're exploring. They don't all end up running to one place and you defeat them all in one shot. So this just kind of keeps a steady wave of enemies coming as you're going through this mission. So I really like that. And that's why I chose to do it this way, in case you're wondering. Yeah. So on each of these, I'm only going to show you how to set up one of these, okay? So you have these 4 collections of toys. Every other one of these is going to get set up the exact same way. So as we look at the spawning chamber and we look at the wave, I've got 3 single BX droids in here, and these are just found right here in my list. And then I did the set count on those. And that's all I've done with that so far. Okay. Now for the properties on these, I'm going to leave the generation delay set to 4. And we're going to leave all of these properties. For the team, you want to set this to something. And I'm going to set it to be the purple team. Okay. The team is not going to matter for this mission. But once I put the treasure chamber in next time for the mission where we're defending the church, if we don't set these enemies to the same team as that treasure chamber, as soon as the enemies start spawning, they're all going to be running toward the church and attacking that thing, even though the mission isn't active, and I didn't want that. So make sure you set the team. You can choose any color you want. I like purple because the purple matches the look of those enemies. the BX droids, so you don't really notice the glow around them too much. Oops. Why did it do that? There we go. Okay, so that's important that you specify that team. And now this toy isn't going to do anything until we activate it, and that's why we have this dynamic trigger here. Yeah, I can't really connect to that as an actor, and so what we're going to do is we're going to use this locator. So I'm going to connect up the dynamic trigger to this locator, and then I'm going to move the locator to be underneath that. Alright? And then on the properties for the dynamic trigger, I'm going to set the target to be the locator, and we're going to set the trigger distance to 40. Okay. And initially, I want this dynamic trigger to be off. I don't want to activate that until the player begins the mission, because otherwise, if the player comes over here from the carrier and they just start running around without talking to Luke Cage and activating all the enemy chambers and destroying them, when they come over and talk to Luke Cage and go off to do the townspeople, there aren't going to be any enemies for them to fight. And so I chose to have this turn that off initially. So on catalyze, we're going to come over here to our dynamic trigger and turn this off. So initially the player is going to run through the city and nothing really is going to be happening except those two cannons that are flying around on paths. Which means that once the mission starts, we need to turn that on. So new logic connection when entered by player any, and again this is on the mission giver's dynamic trigger. We'll come over here and turn this on. And then on this dynamic trigger, new logic connection when entered by player any, meaning they get close enough to this spawning chamber, then we'll go ahead and activate it. And we only want to do this once. So on the dynamic trigger, new logic connection when entered by player any, we'll input into this logic gate. And on the logic gate, new logic connection on output, we'll turn that dynamic trigger back off. So that's how you set that up. And again, those same connections you will make for all of the other sets of controls. So the one that I've got over here, the one in the park, and any others you choose to add around the toy box. And that is it for this first mission. Now I would recommend at this point saving the toy box and reloading it. Exit out of it, come back in to test it. And you probably will want to hook up this button to reset everything, to take Luke Cage back out, and to turn off the replayer. Sorry, couldn't think. So you'll want to make sure you take Luke Cage out and turn off that replayer before you save the toy box. And it's safe for me to do that right now because I don't have either of those in here. So we're good to go. But that's it for the first mission. As I said earlier, it's a simple mission, but it's a good one because it encourages exploration. Next time I'll show you how to build the mission to defend the Doomsday device in the old church. Until then, I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my video today. I know logic videos aren't the most exciting to watch, but you need these videos in order to recreate the gameplay. I always try to make them as easy to follow as possible, so leave me a comment and let me know how I did. And as always, I've got logic diagrams on my blog that will help you connect the Creativitoys that I used today. The link is in the video description. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel by clicking my photo in the lower right corner of this video if you haven't done that already. That's all for me today. Take care.